Thanks, guys, for coming. This is Rick Peterson. He works as the Director of Activities and Facilities at Spectrum High School in Elk River. He has led the growth of the sports to 16 varsity sports, 44 athletic teams, 60 coaches, 40 acres of athletic fields, and 2 new conferences. I'm so excited to hear about this. As a facility director, he has led 5 multi-million-dollar building programs from inception to occupancy totaling over $25 million. He started and coached the cross-country and track and field teams to include over 100 participants and several top finishes at the state meet. Thank you for coming.
Wow. Well, thank you for the introduction. Welcome to each of you. Thanks for being here to learn a little bit more about the journey that we have had at Spectrum. When Stephanie first asked if I would share some about kind of our own journey at Spectrum and where we've come with sports, I kind of looked over my shoulder like, is she talking to me? Who's she talking to? Just because even though it sounds really good, and it is really good, and thank you for that introduction, it's never been linear growth. It's never been something that has just been a steady growth. It's more like a sawtooth. It's like we've been 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. So we're going to take a little look behind the curtain today, and we're going to see some things that beneath the surface are really defining moments, things that have really changed everything here for Spectrum High School and taken us from a place where we had very little to do with sports and athletics to one of the largest athletic programs among charter schools in the state. So if you're ready for the journey here, like I say, it's going to be a little bit of looking behind the scenes, behind the curtain. It's a little bit like this tapestry you see here, that on one side, hopefully it looks nice and smooth, like we've really got things together, but underneath the tapestry, as we all know, for anyone who does any knitting, there's a lot of tangled and a lot of knots in things that we've had to work through as a school to arrive where we're at right now. And the journey continues. We are not there. We haven't got it all figured out yet. We're certainly not a perfect school. Part of the human condition is just us being able to learn to work together, be able to achieve more tomorrow than we have yesterday. And so that is where we're heading here for today as well. With our defining moments, there's one common thing that we're going to keep coming back to this morning, and that common thing is people, because people have been involved all the way through our journey. So we're going to highlight some people. We're going to talk about some of their stories this morning here and how their stories really became defining moments for the school to help propel us to where we've arrived today. But I can't start talking about people unless I also begin with some thank yous here, because there are some people that without their involvement, without their leadership, we would not even be here, and I certainly would not be up here as well. And that starts, we've had 2 executive directors in the history of our school. We've been around for 17 years, starting our 18th year this fall. Vanessa Spark and also Dan DeBrun. Dan is also here in the room as well. And without their exceptional leadership, without their visionary leadership for wanting to see where we could become tomorrow, instead of just focusing on what we've done in the past, we would not be able to be where we are. And so thank you to Vanessa, thank you to Dan, and all they have done and continue to do to help provide the basis and the foundation for allowing us as a school to continue to forge forward with sports and athletics. And I also cannot go on any further without thanking 2 ladies that I work with on a daily basis here. Dina Bondi, I've worked with for 12 years. She's our athletic assistant. And Katie Erdman. And Katie oversees all of our activities that are non-athletic and also our middle school athletic program. If sometimes Spectrum looks kind of like a duck swimming gracefully through the water, they are the feet of the duck. They're paddling underneath constantly. They're just working relentlessly, mostly among other things, making people like myself probably look better than I am. But they are so grateful for both Dina and for Katie for all that they do, continue to do for our school. A joy and honor to continue working with them. And with that, I'd like to start with a quote by Ben Franklin here. And that is that without energy, Without energy, you're really not going to go anywhere. And so the starting point for Spectrum High School was, in fact, to start to pour in energy into what we believed. And we had a really, really different type of start at our school here. We started as a school that was in a Boys and Girls Club. Previously, there was a school in Elk River that went out of business. It wasn't able to continue. It was a faith-based school called Rivers Christian Academy. However, several of the board members from Rivers determined that even though that school wasn't able to continue, that they wanted to start a school, a public charter school. So they went ahead and started Spectrum. We met for the first year in a boys club in Elk River, and then moved after 1 year into modular trailer units. And those trailer units became kind of the starting point where the school began to grow and expand. And there's Stephanie back there. I want to say thank you to Stephanie as well. We have been with Volunteers of America from the beginning, with VOA from the beginning, and Stephanie has been incredibly supportive in terms of challenging us, caring about us, and also just helping to facilitate the growth that we have had as a school and as our athletic programs as well. So thank you, Stephanie. And so back to the story here. Now, Spectrum, in all of these modular units here, that the growth has been exponential over the years. We now have 4 buildings on 2 different locations. 3 of the buildings are close in proximity to one another, the other about a mile distant. We have 900 students that will be joining us this fall here. With that, as far as sports and athletics go, as I was introduced, I was just going through some of those numbers in my mind that, wow, right now we've got 17 teams, varsity teams, that would include several hundred student athletes. We've got 62 coaches. We've got 44 teams when you count all the different levels in terms of where we've come over the course of the last 10, 12 years or so. So it's been rapid growth environment. It hasn't always come easy, though. And so with that, I want to just start by telling you a little bit of story that's kind of a preamble here to kind of get us to the point to better understand the position that Spectrum was in before we began to grow sports and athletics. In 1936, the setting, you'll probably figure this out pretty quickly here. I'm a runner. Okay. The setting, Boston. The event, the marathon. The 1936 Boston Marathon. There was a new kid in town that day. There was a new kid on the block. He was a young buck by the name of Ellison Brown. The press, they called him Tarzan because he didn't look like a gaunt distance runner. What he looked like is he looked like Tarzan. And so Tarzan was there on the start line, and the press absolutely had him pigeonholed. He's the one that was going to win Boston. He'd never run Boston before. But also on the start line that day was a cagey veteran. Name of the veteran was Johnny Kelly. Johnny Kelly had seen these young bucks come and go before. He knew the Boston course, that it generally starts downhill, that over the 26 miles, the first half was generally downhill. But he also knew that those young guys tend to go out too fast, and when they finally get to the town of Newton at about mile marker 19, it begins 4 concentric uphills at that point. And he knew that most of these young guys, they go out too fast, and then they hit Newton and the hills. And he would see them again on the hills, and he would go past them on the hills. And so he wasn't concerned about Tarzan at all this year. And the gun goes off, and just as expected, away goes Ellison. Tarzan Brown takes the lead by the halfway point at Wellesley, 13 miles in. He's a half mile ahead of Johnny Kelly and the rest of the field. But Johnny's still thinking, you know, Newton is coming, and the hills are straight ahead. And sure enough, when they hit mile marker 19, now Johnny Kelly has Tarzan in his sights. By the second hill, Tarzan is within reach. By the third hill, he catches Tarzan, And as he's going by Tarzan, he taps him on the shoulder as if to say, nice job, son, but I'll take it from here. And away he goes. On the fourth hill, something happened. Something that had never happened at Boston before. Nobody really knows what triggered it, but something happened deep inside of Tarzan. Something came to life. There was a spark somewhere. Maybe some people surmise that it was the fact that he was wearing a jersey. He had fashioned himself out of his mother's, one of the garments of his mother's old dress. His mother had just recently passed away, but nobody really knows for sure. But something came to life. And on that fourth hill, Tarzan took off. He caught back up to Johnny Kelly. And he not only caught him, he passed him over the crest of the hill, and now it's 5 miles down to the finish line. And Tarzan Brown held that lead all the way through and became the winner of the 1936 Boston Marathon. And I share that story because the press the next day in the Boston Globe, they wrote it up this way. They said, Tarzan Brown breaks Johnny Kelly's heart on the fourth hill of Newton. And ever since that time, that fourth hill has become known as Heartbreak Hill. That's where it got its name. The hill there that broke Johnny Kelly's heart, revealed heart from Tarzan Brown. And sports are like that. You know, there's a lot of emotion, there's drama, there's resources, there's investment. It's hard, it's long, it's grinding, it's never easy. There's new challenges just about every day, just like every mile of a marathon. And sports will do one of those two things. And it's done both for us at Spectrum. It's revealed heart at times, and it's shown that we had something that we didn't even know that we had. And maybe we didn't even know how it was that we had it, but it also has broken our heart a few times. So with that, on to our first little vignette here. The first person that I'd like to introduce you to, here's a guy by the name of Alex. I met Alex just as I was getting started at Spectrum, and when I met Alex, he's kind of big, like kind of a bear, but more like a gentle bear, a very, very kind spirit. And he used to call me Coach. I've never coached him. I finally did coach him one year, but I never coached him. But Coach, when are we going to start football? I said, I guess let's do an information meeting. Let's see if we have interest. We're in the modular units now at that time, those trailer units. So we put up some posters, said, let's see if we have interest for football. So we called the meeting. I walked into the room. Alex is there, and no one else. That's it. We had one person. And I said, Alex, we can't start football. There's only one person here, only you. And I said, you got to go find a couple buddies. Fast forward a year. Now we're in a new school, what became our high school. Brand new building. Alex is, Coach, when are we going to start football? Well, let's do an information meeting. Let's see if we have interest. So we did. And we put up flyers and we advertised it. And I said, Alex, you got to find a couple buddies. And I walked in the room. And there's Alex. And two of his buddies. And no one else. That was it. 3. So we had 3 that year. And I said, Alex, we can't start football. We got to have more than 3. So fast forward. One more year. Fast forward. Coach, you know this. Okay. When are we going to start football? Okay, I know, Alex. We're going to start football. But here, we got to do an information meeting. We start the information. We put up the flyers. We put out the announcements, and so I said, but Alex, you got to find more than 2. We can't do this with 3. So I walk into. Alex is there. 2 of his buddies are there, and 24 others, and we started football that fall. And it became a defining moment for our school. Persistence matters. Don't give up. When it doesn't look like it's going to happen, don't give up. You just never know when. You just never know why. However, where we were discouraged, feeling like maybe we were running up one of those Newton Hills, and it just wasn't meant to be, it wasn't going to be. Now, all of a sudden, we have a football team. Let me introduce you to one of our first coaches. His name is Coach Mills. Coach Mills came from Kansas. Now, they know a little something about football in Kansas. And so Coach Mills came up here, and I'm not exactly sure what his expectations were, but Coach Mills is like all set to go. He's on gung-ho. He's ready to take this program, just further than certainly than we could ever have imagined. And so the first home game we lose by almost 60 points, 60 points. Coach Mills is outside the athletic building, and I approach him, and he's hanging his head, and I'm like, you doing okay, Coach Mills? I said, no, not really. and he's just down and dejected, and I said, and it triggered a conversation. It triggered a conversation that became another defining moment for our school. And we had a long talk about, if we build the right type of team here, the winning will eventually take care of itself. And Coach Mills did that. He was able to focus on the things that matter most. He was able to mentor kids. He was able to display and model integrity before the team. He focused in practices on having fun and building a team rapport, on helping young men and young women be able to find themselves in this sport and grow and understand how to withstand all the different challenges and the conflicts that we all face in life. And Coach Mills focused on that. And the winning eventually did take care of itself in time. Another defining moment, though, for our school was determining the type of athletic programs we were going. It was not going to be a win-at-all-cost approach. It was going to be a focus on the essentials of what helps us grow as human beings, and how do we help students be able to navigate through all the different challenges in their lives. And as we did that, and as the focus was on things like sportsmanship, on academics, on positive values, on displaying and modeling these things before them, and of course on competition as well. As we did those things, all of a sudden we found that within years, the winning did take care of itself. The next story here, next person I want to highlight here is someone that that had to do with the other end of coaching here. Now, I'm not going to give you names or anything like this, but this is one of those looks behind the curtain that I'm not real proud of, because I was involved in this situation, and as I look back, it definitely turned into another moment, another one of those moments where we were able to say this defined who we are and defines what athletics is about. But it was mostly because I didn't recognize at the time how powerful coaches are and their influence. Because just as positive as Coach Mills was in being able to focus on the essential ingredients of building an athletic program, this other coach was very much detracted from what the vision and values of the coach was. It was very early in my tenure at Spectrum. Like any athletic director, I want to be like too. I don't want to be in that position where I'm constantly, harassing coaches and correcting them and telling them what they should do and so forth. So I know I was letting some things go. And there were some things happening in practices and even games I was saying, this doesn't really reflect who we are as a school, but we'll be okay. We'll be fine. It'll all just kind of blow over and pass over. Well, it didn't. And it went on, not only in this sport, but it started in another sport as well. And it became quite clear that where our athletic programs were beginning to go, they're beginning to go this way, where the school was definitely charting a course the other direction here. And athletics, in fact, were becoming a detraction, not an enhancement to the overall vision and mission and purpose of the school. Now, in this particular case, it took an entire team being willing to quit before it got my attention. And I realized that, I cannot let this go. And we were able to eventually to get the ship righted and get things turned. But that's one of those stories, that's one of those tangled, knotted stories of programs can also be taken the other direction by a coach as well. And coaches are so important to the program. I mean, they are in the driver's seat, one way or another. They're either going to enhance and enrich the entire experience of the student athlete, or they're going to detract. They're going to take them away, not only the sport, not only the team, but the entire school in some cases. And that's where we were headed. That's the path we were headed on before we would get that readjusted again. So another defining moment. Actually, it was one where we had an entire team determined that they were going to quit because of the way that they were being treated by a coach. And that also led to me better understanding, as an athletic director, better understanding not only the important role of coaches, but also the opportunities that they have in terms of what we do when we hire coaches. When we're hiring coaches, we're looking for men and for women who not only share the same vision, the same passion that Spectrum has, viewing athletics as a part of our education. I mean, there's plenty of teams out there, there's plenty of associations out there that are win at all cost. Whatever it takes, we just want to win. Much like a professional team, it's just all about the winning. We love to win at Spectrum. We've won some championships. We enjoy that. But that's not what we're about. We're about putting together winning and academics, positive values, and good sportsmanship. Put them all together, and yes, we want it all. That's where we're aiming, and coaches have a huge role in that. When we're interviewing coaches, we're asking, would I want my son or daughter to play for them? Are they going to represent where we're headed as a school, or are they going to become a detraction? I mean, coaches are so important. They do so much. You know, they're motivating, they're recruiting. They actually have to be almost like behavior specialists. I mean, I had this experience myself as a running coach. I had a couple of runners, Courtney and Brittany. And Brittany, she was a really good runner, but she ran best when she was mad, when she was angry. And so sometimes I would say things to Brittany just to get her fired up. Brittany, get on the bus. Why are we always waiting for you? In about that tone. And you could just see in her eyes, she just flash of anger. Like you just see, oh, she's ticked now. And she would go out and run the race of her life. And then afterwards, I'd meet with Brittany and say, Brittany, you know, I wasn't really angry with you. And she would laugh and say, I didn't think you were. And it got to the point with Brittany, which she would ask me, she would say, Coach, are you going to get me fired up again, get me mad again so I run better? And so she caught on pretty quickly. But her sister, one of her sisters, was just the opposite. She was one that had to be handled with kid gloves. You look at her cross-eyed, she would burst into tears. In fact, I had never, as a running coach, I had never ever seen someone race a full 5K, 3.1 miles before, sobbing the entire time. But she did. And I remember running up to her once during one race, saying, are you okay? Do you need to stop? No, I'm okay, I'm fine. And crying the entire time through the race. And so coaches not only need to be really good at recruiting, be good at motivating, be good with their technical skills, but they also need to be good at being able to treat and understand that people are different and they're able to adapt their methods to different people as well. That became a defining moment for me. Now, all of these defining moments I'm sharing about are really from my perspective. You know, there probably are other defining moments in the school, some that may even be greater than the things that I have learned. But in my journey here, that became a defining moment when I began to realize that hire coaches that are more than just technical experts, that are more than just win at all costs type coaches. That might look good on the surface, but it's really not going to fly in the long run. Not if it's not consistent with where your school is heading. So that defining moment then led to another encounter here, and that one was that we had to make a couple really big decisions at critical times. Now the first, I already talked about the one, you know, how we came from these modular units. And from the modular units, we were in a crisis. Well, honestly, this is hard to even talk about as we look back on those days. We were on land that was rented, and we had a 3-year agreement. The 3 years were up. We were in modular trailer units. Guess what? Each of those modular trailer units, the time was up at the same time, 3 years. And we had a confined space. We'd grown to almost 200 students, but we couldn't take another student. We were jam-packed. You saw the modular trailer units. We were jam-packed in those units, and there's no way. So we're like, we can't get any more students. We can't have any more funding. Things are tight as they were, and a huge, huge defining moment came in 2010 when the school board at Spectrum, in all of these financial pressures and all the uncertainty of the time, we didn't know even where the school was going to be. In some aspects, we didn't even know if there was going to be a school the next year. In all of that, the school had started to outsource athletics, push them off, let others take sports. And so we got all the way down to the point where even though we had a fast start with sports to begin with the school when we started in the boys club, by the time we were looking 3 years later, all of the sports had been pushed off as co-ops hosted by other schools, all except for 2, boys golf and girls soccer. That's all that was left. But the board made a really important decision. In light of all of the uncertainty of the school, in light of all of the financial pressures of how do we keep going and all of the rents that are going up and eviction notices that were certainly going to be coming our direction, the board decided this. In 2010, they said, we're going to prioritize athletics. We're taking sports back for ourselves because we are an education institution here, and we believe that sports are an integral part of our education. A coach is like a teacher. They will be mentoring, they will be caring, they will be teaching, they will be helping young men and young women grow in their journey. And that more, they didn't have the money to invest. Previously, sports is more like we want to make sure the books are balanced at the end of the year, where we're not really outlaying any more money than we have coming in. Well, no longer was the case. Spectrum made a concerted decision, and that board and the director of the board determined that we are going to invest in athletics. It now is going to be something that we determine that we are going to put money into, expecting that the result is going to be the same as we see all through the rest of the education that we offer in all of the other programs that we offer. And so that's what they did. It became a defining moment for the school, that no longer was it we have to balance the books on the sports. What now we need to do is we need to recognize this is an investment, and it has been, with the leadership of Vanessa and Dan and with the school boards that have continued to reinforce that. We view athletics as an investment, as an extension of education. We view athletics as something where at the end of the school year, when the seniors are all sharing, what they enjoyed most about the year, so many of them, so many now, will not only talk about teachers they've had in geography or algebra, but they'll talk about their volleyball coach, talk about their football coach, their soccer coach. They'll talk they'll talk about just the experiences they had on a team retreat or something that was fun, that is something that they will never forget. And we began to realize that investment that we were now making, that financial investment we were making, was going to pay off. Not only in these experiences, but these kids are never going to forget their coaches, ever, for the rest of their life, one way or another, for good or for bad. They were always going to remember these coaches. And early on, we had that experience where we had some coaches that they weren't going to be remembered in a positive light. But since we've been able to make adjustments and have much, much better results with coaches who have been able to be very comprehensive in their approach to education. And that's the difference between education-based athletics as compared to just win-at-all-cost type athletics. You can get that almost anywhere else you want to look. So a defining moment came from that board making that decision that we are going to now view athletics as an investment, not as an expense. As we go on here, as we continue on here, just some of the history here, things that we went on. I also met a guy, we had to make a couple of really big decisions as a school at a time when really, like, how can we do this? I don't see how this can happen. Now, you probably know public charter schools are not really that well known. And dare I even say that well respected by a lot of other schools. A lot of times they just don't know us, they don't understand us, they don't want to play us because they don't really understand who we are, what we have to offer, even what our competitive level is and so forth. We couldn't get into a conference no matter how hard we tried. Nobody would let us in. They don't want to play us, they don't want us in their conference. We're out there doing independent schedules, playing teams that were way overmatched with, and other teams that we have no business even being on the same field with. And finally, we just took we took the bull by the horns and we just said, you know what, we're going to do this ourselves. We started our own conference. We said, you won't let us in our conference, you won't let us in your conference, we'll start our own. And so we knew that there would be a financial outlay to do this. It cost money to start an athletic conference, but we did it. And the conference didn't last more than a few years, but it became a defining moment for us because we determined and we found for ourselves that even when it appears that there's no path forward and we're just going around and round and revisiting the same issues of not being respected and not getting games, not having opportunities for our students to earn academic honors or to earn all conference honors, not having opportunity for our teams to play and for championships. Not having any of those things, we just determined we're going to do this ourselves. So we did. And it worked well. We banded with other charter schools and similar type schools and started our own conference. What it did and why it became a defining moment is it put us on the map. It put us on the radar of other schools. And all of a sudden they were like, oh, wow, Spectrum, we've heard of you now. Aren't you in that conference over here? Yeah, we're in that conference. Yeah, you want to play us? And so all of a sudden, the impact went all the way through all of the different sports that we had began starting. Getting aligned with other schools was huge and became defining for us. At the same time, though, we had other frustrations. We were playing on city fields and on city gyms. And if they didn't want us there for whatever reason, we're not playing. We had to cancel games right before games because they just decided, oh, we don't want you here today or we can't have you here today. We determined, you know what? We need to make an investment here. We need to, and of course, money is always tight. I'm sure money is tight for your school. It's tight for our school too. But once again, we saw the investment and we said, we need to buy some fields. Now, this one's a little more difficult, a little bit more challenging because the fields that we had our eye on were the fields that we'd been evicted from. So we didn't have maybe the greatest relationship with the owner of that property at the time we left. And it wasn't hostile, but it wasn't friendly either. We got out of there with those modular units in tow one day before the limit by when we had some huge fines we would have had to pay otherwise. But we got out just in the nick of time, and that was sort of lingering. However, we determined, you know what? Let's go back and talk to him. And let's let bygones be bygones. And let's water under the bridge, and we met with him, and we said, you know what? We just don't feel good about the way things ended here. We you know, and whether this was ever going to work to get athletic fields or not, we want the opportunity just to say, hey, we are grateful to you. You gave us 3 amazing years where our school grew greatly and really became foundational type years for our school. So what we did is we met with him, and we just told him that. We just said thank you. And at the end of the meeting, oh, by the way, you know, if you're ever thinking you might want to sell that property, you know, we're kind of looking down the road and thinking we might like to have some athletic fields someday. And he said, well, funny that you mentioned that we were kind of thinking that maybe we might want to sell that land. Fast forward, a year later, we own 40 acres that we've developed into athletic fields at a price that the school could afford. And the gentleman, oh, by the way, he becomes one of our initial scholarship donators. A scholarship is donated in his name on behalf of his family to the school that continued for several years to come. And now, even today, his grandson attends Spectrum High School. And so with that, we ended up with opportunity, not because we had necessarily done things right, even in the manner we left. And like I said, there was tension there, and it was not comfortable. But being able and being willing to go back and just say, you know what, regardless of how we felt about each other at that time, we want you to know that we are grateful. You know, we are thankful for what you gave us. And by doing that, it opened up doors and opportunities that we never envisioned. So that when you see the fields as they are today here, that's the same field in the background you see from the football shot there. You see that it completely has transformed our sports. No longer do we have to say, oh, can't play today, city doesn't want us. You know, can't play today, Park and Rec says no, fields are too muddy or whatever, or gym's not available or whatever. Now we have the ability to be able to make those decisions for ourselves when and if we're able to play games and contests. So that is just another defining moment that happened in our school. All that became because we were willing to come back and say thank you and be grateful to someone. And that's kind of a little bit of a lost art these days. You know, I don't know if you're involved in sports and athletics, at least to the extent I am, you find out more and more just that it's really hard for people to say thank you. It's really hard for them to appreciate what others have done for them. And when you do it, though, just look at the type of opportunities that can come forward, including 40 acres of athletic fields that we never thought would happen and never dreamed of. So with that, Joel is a guy I met early on, but actually I met his mother almost daily because Joel was a runner that I coached. And virtually every single day I met with his mom at the end of practice because Joel was a little disruptive. No, he was really disruptive. He liked to pick on people. He liked to touch people. He liked to push people. He liked to wrestle people. He liked to do just about anything that would be distracting to what we were trying to do as a team. And so I got to know his mom really well. And pretty much for a while, every day after practice, we would talk about what Joel had done to other people. And so, but here's the cool thing about Joel is that nobody gave up on Joel. No one. His coaches didn't give up on him. Teachers didn't give up on him because he's disruptive in the school too. His parents didn't give up on him. Joel, by the time he was a sophomore and then a junior, became, as I look back, probably the most outstanding student leader I've seen in my entire life. He matured into someone that was unrecognizable from who he was early on. And Joel eventually went on, and we were so impressed with him that as he was going through undergraduate in the area, we invited him back. We said, Joel, we got to have you back as a coach now. You've been 2 years as a captain, strong captain. You need to come back as a coach now. He did. For a couple of years, he came back as probably one of our best assistant coaches that we've ever had. Now Joel is just finishing up medical school up in Grand Forks right now. But it reminded me, it became a defining moment that never, ever give up on someone, ever. You just never know when that disruptive person is going to, in fact, be a gem and someone who would positively impact the lives of so many others around him. Joel's not the only one who's failed. We've all heard these types of stories before. Disney failed, bankruptcy before he struck it. He struck gold with the Disney Kingdom there. Henry Ford went bankrupt before Ford Motor Company came into prominence. You probably haven't even heard of these two guys, Bernie Marcus and Arthur Blank. They both got fired from their jobs as in a hardware store, different hardware stores. They joined together to form their own hardware store, and now Home Depots are everywhere around the world. Failure is often the launch pad for great success. One of my favorite stories, and I think you've probably heard this one as well, a guy way back in the 1800s lost an election. He had a nervous breakdown, had to get medical treatment for a nervous breakdown. So he decided to run for election again. Lost 4 more elections, 4 in a row, and got some more treatment, okay? And after that, I don't know how this happened, but he ends up on the ticket as a vice president of the United States. Lost that election too. So he sets his sights a little bit lower. Okay, now I'm going to just run for Senate. Lost that election too, okay? Somehow ends up running for president, and in 1860, you know who's elected president after all of that failure? Abraham Lincoln. There he is. Failure is a launch pad. One of my favorite teachers of all time was a guy who's no longer with us here. He was a teacher in Bismarck, North Dakota. His name was Cliff Cushman. Now, sorry, we got another running illustration here. Hang in there, okay? But Cliff Cushman, in addition to being an English teacher in Bismarck, North Dakota, he was a really fast runner. He got second place, the silver medal in the Olympics in the 400-meter hurdles. You know, one lap around the track going over barriers, got second place. He had it won. He had the race won. Shortly before the end, he stumbled 3 meters from the end, 3 meters from the end of the race. He tripped and fell, landed flat on his face, got back up and still in time to get second place. That's his story. And he wrote a letter after that happened. He wrote a letter to his students in Bismarck. And the name of the letter was I Dare You. I'm going to just read a little bit of that letter. Here's what he said. He said, don't feel sorry for me, he writes. He said, in a split second, all of the many years of training, pain, sweat, blisters, agony of running were simply were wiped out. But I tried. I would much rather fail knowing that I put forth an honest effort than if I had never tried at all. Over 15 years ago, I saw a star, first place in the Olympic Games. I literally started running after that star. And in 1960, I came within 3 yards of it, but it receded away from me. Certainly, I was disappointed, falling flat on my face. However, there's nothing I can do about it now. Only I can pick myself up, brush off the cinders. Back in those days, tracks were made of cinders. It's kind of like a fine dirt. Brush off the cinders from my wounds and take one more step. And that one more step will lead to one more step until my steps will turn into miles and my miles will turn into success. I know I may never make it, but you know, at least I'm going to try. How about you? I dare you. I dare you to clean up your language. I dare you to honor your father and mother. I dare you to unselfishly help someone less fortunate than yourself and enjoy the wonderful feeling that goes with it. I dare you to look up at the stars, not down at the mud. Set your sights on one of them up until now that has been unattainable for you. You may be surprised at what you can achieve with a sincere effort. So, get up. Pick the cinders up out of your wounds and take one more step. I dare you. His letter was received by his students in Bismarck. He never went back to teaching. There's more to his story. At that time, our nation was embroiled in war in Vietnam, and he enlisted. He enlisted in the Air Force at that time. And on September 25th, 1966, his F-105 Thunder Chief was shot down, and still to this day, he's listed as MIA. And some people think, you know, I wonder what kind of great man Cliff would have become. You know, what type of great things, you know, that he would have achieved. But of course, he already did achieve those things. And he left that letter as a memory to his students at Bismarck, and also to us as well, that failure is the launch pad for success. For Joel Zimmerman, for Cliff Cushman, and all of these others we talked about, failure was just a stepping stone to what they were going to become, to what we can become. And that became a defining moment for Spectrum. Love talking about all the great things. You know, 17 varsity sports, 44 teams, you know, 60-some coaches, and so forth. Love talking about that, you know, and yet we also happen to know at Spectrum that it's been through the school of hard knocks. There's been just as many times where we've looked at ourselves and we said, you know, what are we doing here? You know, nothing is going right. We can't seem to get it right. We've got coaches going this way. We've got sometimes even an AD that's not dealing with things that need to get dealt with, that make us more consistent as a school and bind our athletics. We've got risk takers of our board and directors that are out there doing things that others are scrunching their eyes at, saying, you know, really, do we have money to do that? Can we do that? but they're willing to see the ultimate outcome rather than the challenges or even some of the failures that we've had in the past. The next defining moment became after we had dealt with Joel and all the things that he had gone through from failure to success, was realizing that we were going to have to deal with some conflict along the way. Isn't that human nature? You know, all of us, we have conflict in our lives. And I was at a marriage seminar once with my wife, and the speaker was talking about, you know, when you've got those feelings when both of you are like, well, they're more wrong than I am. You know, they should be the first one, you know, to come forth and apologize. And you're kind of waiting for each other, but neither one of you is going to do it. That was the topic. So I raised my hand. I said, well, who should come forward first? Who should be the first one to apologize or approach the other? And her answer actually became a defining moment for me in my own leadership. And what she said really changed my outlook on things. She said, well, who should come forward first? Well, whoever is more mature should come forward first. Now it's a race to see who can be the first one. Ha! I beat you to it. I was wrong. Okay, and so now we're but that works for sports and athletics as well. You know, being able to resolve and take the initiative to resolve conflict is huge. Not having those tensions out there. When you're starting to sense things are starting to drift, whether it's with a program or a coach or with a student athlete, with the parents, but being willing to pick up the phone, not to write them a nasty email. You know, not to just vent to someone else who can do nothing about it, but to pick up the phone and say, hey, can we talk for a minute? I just want to make sure we're on the same page. I just sense that maybe we're not looking at this the same way. You approach like that, and it's amazing. It's amazing how pretty soon before you know it, you are not only bound together in terms of this journey you got, but all the other things there in the past now, and now you're forging on some new relationships here. So we've had that. Now one that was a little bit more of a kind of a humorous type conflict that we went through here at Spectrum, because it went on endlessly, and I didn't think it was ever going to end. And that was our mascot of who we were going to be. Now that shouldn't be that hard, right? We're known as the Spectrum Sting now, but not always. You know, we thought we might be the Spartans, we might be the Scorpions, we might be the Sting, we might be whatever. And a number of other things. This went on for 4 years. 4 years of conflict. But it was not hostile type conflict. But nevertheless, they made it to the school board 3 times, you know, in terms of trying to figure out, and they couldn't, and they'd get tabled, and it'd go on and on and on. Never could figure out what we were. Finally, we ended up being able to resolve this conflict by determining we are the Sting. We're the Sting. And with the Sting, then we entered another 1 or 2 years of conflict because we couldn't figure out what a sting was. Was a sting a bee, a hornet? Was it a scorpion? What type of sting was this? We're a sting. So we just determined we're a verb. That's what we are. We're a verb. Our mascot's a verb. And so eventually we came up with a mascot here. Now this mascot actually is not a bee or a horn or anything else. The mascot is a sting. That's what our mascot is. Now, it took a long time to work through all of the different conflict, you know, and there were times when there were campaigns going one direction or another for this, for that, but it also became a defining moment because it took resilience, not to just give up and say, okay, well, we're just going to do this or that, but to be patient through the course of conflict, not only to learn to take the initiative, but to be patient and realize that sometimes things just take time, and they ultimately will find a resolution, and it did. Now, one of the things that I enjoy that about a survey that was taken by the Minnesota High School League is that several years ago they polled a lot of the student athletes around the state, and asked them, why do you play sports? You know, and 90% of them, almost 90% of them, said we play sports to have fun. Right? That's why they do it. Yeah. Now, almost 92% of the coaches were polled and said the opposite thing. You probably know what they said. We play sports to win. Yeah. So you see that there is, you know, most kids just want to play sports to have fun. This is a defining moment as well. This is something that's really important to realize, is that most kids are there just to have fun. They aren't there for championships. I'm a coach. I want to win championships, okay? But most of the kids I coach, they want to just have fun. And how do you know if they're having fun? One way I've learned is I just listen. Sometimes I'll just be quiet and still, and I'll just listen. Is there laughter? I'm listening for laughter. If I'm hearing laughter, I know that we're on the right track. And we'll do it with our coaches too. Now this is a silly, crazy video. It's really, really bad. And when we show these things to the kids, we do these a couple times a year. When we show these to the kids, they always roll their eyes and they're like, okay, these guys are crazy. But you know what? It's not so much that the video is just that bad or silly, but the process of making the video involves roarous laughter among the coaches. We have fun. And there's something about our spirit that when we're having fun, it brings out the best in us. So here's just a very, very short glimpse of one we did this past year. These are all very introverted coaches, by the way. We had to pay them a lot of money to do this. Listen for laughter. It may not be in the final product, but in the process, listen. And if there's laughter, you're probably on the right track. Another defining moment of understanding what the students, athletes are looking for. It's not just to win championships. Certainly for some it is. But for most, for the vast majority, they want to have fun. They want to do things that will be memory builders for the rest of their life. They want to know that their coaches genuinely care about them and also can kind of take off the facade a little bit and be able to be laughed at as well. Finally, we've arrived. Here we have we had one more thing as a defining moment that's been an ongoing one for our school because we've been in all sorts of different directions with this one, and that one has been our grade check policy. Actually, I put it as a defining moment because we've had to come back several times and just examine, is this really doing what we want it to do? Now, if you have any Fs at Spectrum or more than one D, you're not playing. That's it. You're not playing in the game. And so you have to keep your grades up. And we've been resolute about that. We've made some adjustments over some of the years, but we've several times had to come back as administration and as a coaching staff sometimes too and say, is this accomplishing what we wanted to? I mean, it's really hard to lose some of your best players out there on the field or the court or out there on the course or wherever when they just aren't making it with grades. But we have stood tall and we've stood firm that, you know what, we're going to continue to reinforce our grade check policy. And it's made all the difference in the world for so many, the vast majority, probably at least 3/4, very lickety-split, get their grades caught up and they get themselves eligible because they don't want to miss games. Some don't, and some, it becomes an issue. And we did one other thing, and so really that whole grade check policy and coming back to it time and time again have been a defining moment for Spectrum of determining that, you know what, student comes before athlete, and so grades will come before play. And with that, we also have had some behavior expectations we've had to address by way of policy as well. Now, we've all been there. We're all, many of us are probably parents, and we know that there are issues out there in terms of some of the intensity and some of the challenges that schools and administration face with parents wanting to basically take over and determine that even though, no, I've never coached a day in my life before, but I've invested a lot of money, a lot of time, a lot of personal resource in my son and my daughter, and they aren't being treated and they aren't being coached the way I want them to be coached, so you will need to change your coach or you'll need to change their methods. Been there many, many times. And in fact, they're this week right now with some. And yet we've enacted 2 policies that have been game changers, complete game changers. Not that they've taken it away, they haven't, but they've helped tremendously. The first one has been when we get to our sports meetings, where we meet with the parents, the players before, we tell them, you are never, we've wrote it right into our athletic handbook, you are never to talk to a coach on game day. We don't want you talking to a coach about anything on game day. Stay clear. We just know there's a lot of emotion that goes with game days. I've been at my worst as an athletic director and as a coach on game day because everyone's revved up. We're all, everything's intense, and all it takes is a little tiny trigger and things are going to spiral out of control quickly. So no contact with coaches on game day. Don't approach them after the game. I don't care what it's about. Other than if you're going to take them home and check them out so you can drive them home, don't have any conversations about the contest with them. The other one, though, and this one was interesting, is that we don't allow our coaches to talk at all to parents, not at all, about playing time. If even there's a wink, hint, like, this is really about playing time for Johnny or Susie, our coach is told that our policy is that we cannot discuss playing time. What we can do is we can work with you and we can talk with you and we can have a meeting, not on game day, but we can have a meeting with you about how Johnny or Susie can continue to get better and improve in their skills. That may or may not result in more playing time or a different position or whatever it is that the issue is, but no discussion about playing time. And that's taken away easily 90% of the issues. It once again became a defining moment for us at Spectrum of being willing to set policy in place right in the midst of a really intense type situation with parents and others who essentially wanted to take over. I would be remiss if I didn't share this one final lesson that we've learned, this one final thing that in fact has become not only distinct, but it's become defining, is that our school, when we started, several of the board members started the school after a faith-based school had closed their doors and not been able to continue. They were the same board members, and they determined that we want to start a school. We want to not only start a school, we want there to be high behavior expectations, we want there to be small class sizes. We want there to be the opportunity for academics to be absolutely paramount here, and we want to enact service learning projects, community outreach, where our school is engaged in and with the rest of the community. They were willing to take the failure of that school and determine that we're going to learn from those experiences and we are going to start Spectrum High School, which they did. That became our ultimate defining moment, that we had a group of board members at that time who didn't give up when it got tough. When even the school that they'd had for years and years didn't succeed, they found a different approach to still accomplish what they ultimately wanted to do. And you gotta have faith for it. Faith is just believing in something or someone who's bigger than yourself. And they must have had some sort of faith because they had this group that came alongside them called the Moms Group. I don't know if you've ever heard of Moms Group. A lot of us have met moms that are more like grizzly bears when they are talking to us about their son or their daughter in sports. But this group of moms, what they would do is they would walk all around the school, around the outside of the school, and they would pray for our school. And they still do it to this day. And regardless of where you're at in your own belief system and so forth, what we have learned at Spectrum is there's something special happening with these moms who are praying for our school. And we as a school have no doubt been blessed because of that. And so with that, those are just some of the lessons, some of the things in our journey here, some of the defining moments that have really taken us to where we are today. I'm going to summarize with just a couple of points here in closing here. First point here is that you got to start by moving. I didn't show you the picture earlier, but my grandma had an old Rambler. Anyone even hear of Ramblers? Rambler. Had no power steering. If you sat behind the wheel and the car wasn't moving, you couldn't hardly even turn the wheel. You're like, I can't get the wheel turned. And yet, if the car was moving, you'd think the thing had power steering. It would handle so slick, so nice. You got to be moving first. So if you're sitting here thinking, what am I supposed to do? Where do I start? Move. Even if it's not even the right direction, just start moving. You can make adjustments once you start moving. But don't let indecision paralyze you. Don't keep it from what your school can become when it comes to sports and athletics. So just start by moving, and then you can make those adjustments. Secondly, you got to put energy into it. If you're trying to go across a river and you don't put any energy, you're going to get swept downstream, and you're going to go wherever the river wants you to go. You're going to have to put some energy into what you're going to do. So just determine that you might not have the most ability. You might not be the best at what you do. But energy, remember that quote from Benjamin Franklin? Energy will overcome a multitude of other weaknesses. So put energy into it. Real quick story here. Kid is working at McDonald's, but he's constantly the busybody. He's constantly, straightening the napkins and wiping the counters and doing all the little extras. Pretty soon, his boss is probably going to do what with that kid? He's probably going to elevate him, try to say, you should be a supervisor. You should be a supervisor because you're really attentive. You really got a good work ethic here. Well, that supervisor keeps doing the same thing. He keeps seeing all the little things that need to get done around him. And pretty soon, now he becomes a manager. That manager becomes an owner, then a franchise owner, and it goes on and on and on. Energy will make up for a multitude of other things that aren't right in our life. So put some energy into it. Start moving, put energy into it. Finally, be willing to take those calculated risks. Thank goodness for the initial board of Spectrum, the ultimate number one defining moment that determined to start a school, Spectrum High School, after another school had failed. Thank goodness for the board that determined that even in all the financial difficulties we're facing, all of the hard things we're going through, even the uncertainty whether our school's even going to exist after we get evicted from this land and these trailers, thank goodness they prioritized sports and athletics and said, you know what? We don't know answers to all these other things, but we do know this. We are going to invest in sports and athletics, and they're going to become a part of the fabric of who we are as a school. They're going to be no different than the education we offer in the classroom. It is part of our education plan. They were willing to take calculated risk, and they were willing to count the cost by making a financial investment. Anticipate failure. It's not going to go well all the time. I just coming off a horrible week. I mean, it's like I can't do anything right this week. I've got parents mad at me. I've got coaches mad at me. I've got every single place. And I'm supposed to be giving a talk and trying to inspire others to do this. Anticipate that you will have failure. You will have hardship. You'll have challenging type times. Anticipate it. It's going to happen. Be ready for it. It happens. Johnny Kelly, it happened to him in the Boston Marathon. He failed, but you know what? I didn't finish the rest of the story. Johnny Kelly, after he got beat by Tarzan Brown, he came back to win Boston 4 more times. He won Boston Marathon more than any other runner ever in the history of this world, winning Boston Marathon. He didn't let it get him down. Same story for Cliff Cushman. Same story for Joel Zimmerman. Same story for Spectrum High School, where we've been down and out and thinking, how are we going to do this? We have no place to play. We have no way of doing this. Anticipate there'll be failure, and then be persistent, realizing that, you know what, it might take time, but you'll eventually figure out that mascot. You'll eventually be able to figure out, who Sting is or what Sting is in your life and in your athletic environment. And then finally, be willing to initiate and resolve conflict. It's inevitable. Tensions are going to mount. People are not going to get along. We're part of the human race. That's just part of the human condition. But when it happens, be willing to be the mature one that steps forward first and says, hey, can we talk about this? Hey, I'm not sure we're on the same page. I just want to make sure that we're okay, that you're okay with this. And be willing to take those steps. And finally, if you forget everything else that we went through here today, a defining moment, listen for laughter. It's why most of us do what we do. We want to have fun. We want to enjoy the experience. Just listen. Is there laughter? What are you hearing around yourselves? So with that, I don't know how we're doing for time here. We are Okay. What we'll do is just see if there's any quick questions here, otherwise be dismissed.